Afternoon, all. I hope you had a fabulous lunch. We were dancing a little bit in this room to some of the tunes that were on the playlist. As Emma mentioned, the musical choices for the Employability Lab are always one of the biggest debates that we have as a team. It's a real pleasure to be presenting today rather than hosting. I've hosted a couple of these over the last few years, and it's a real pleasure to be presenting instead today. So thank you for having me. So this afternoon, I'm going to be sharing with you some exclusive early insights from some research Handshake has just completed with students and graduates exploring how they are navigating their career at the moment, but also their perceptions about AI. But before we dive into the research, we've talked a lot about AI already today, and I wanted to share two graphs that I really believe bring to life visually why we're talking about AI, why everyone's been talking about AI for the last 12 months, and why we are probably going to be talking about it for at least the next few years as well. So the first, many of the colleagues here today will be aware of the AI developments that have taken place over the last few years, and a lot of the speakers already today have kind of nodded to some of them. But I think this graph really brings it to life visually. It shows performance relative to human performance between 2000 and 2020. And you can see in the last 10 years, so in the second half of the graph, that AI performance has really risen exponentially. You know, some of those lines are pretty much straight up, to be honest, if you look at the last few years. And they're really sort of now, or have done in the last few years, begun to surpass human baselines for some basic kind of tasks around recognition, comprehension, language and language understanding. And this graph was actually produced, believe it or not, last summer. And so there's a link in the bottom if you want to go and explore more around where that's come from and the piece around that. But it was produced last summer before OpenAI actually released ChatGPT, which has obviously further accelerated these developments, which brings me on to the second graph that I wanted to share with this group. And those generative AI developments like ChatGPT mean experts now predict that AI will achieve human-level performance for abilities like social and emotional reasoning that Nima talked about this morning far sooner than previously thought. So this graph, although it's a bit of a complicated graph, shows on the left-hand side a list of capabilities, and the dotted lines represent predictions that were made in 2017. And the solid lines either represent what has already been achieved or what is now predicted. So essentially what this graph is showing is that it's predicting that AI will perform at a median level of human performance by the end of this decade. And its performance will complete with the top 25 percentile of people completing these tasks before 2040. And in some cases, that is now 40 years faster than experts predicted just 5 years ago. And 5 years ago is not a long time at all. So that is a really significant change in just the last 12 months. And whilst these are, obviously just predictions, and we've sort of talked a bit at various different presentations today around this, I think this really visually represents how quickly AI is advancing and how it's that pace has really increased rapidly. And those rapid developments now mean that a large number of companies and organizations across a huge range of industries are now building applications that use generative AI. And I've included a handful of examples on the left-hand side of this screen that span a wide variety of industries and really show the real-world influence of generative AI across those facets of work and education. And I'm not going to dig into all of them, but I am going to call out one, which is Carmingo, which many of you may have already heard of, which is a chatbot teaching assistant, which provides personalized support to students and prompts critical thinking by not giving students the answers, but rather sort of prompting them to think about why they're asking that question, how they might think about a problem differently. And for those of you that haven't had a chance to, there's actually a great TED talk by the founder of Khan Academy, who developed Carmingo, which I definitely recommend people watching if you're interested. But to bring this back to sort of UK and why this is relevant for the UK, back in July, Khan Academy actually announced a partnership with Instructure, who own Canvas. which I'm sure many of the universities represented on this call actually use for their VLE. And they announced new tools, so bringing together Carmingo and Canva to support essay feedback, grading, and lesson planning. So you will probably in the not too distant future begin to see tools like Carmingo embedded in some of the technology that you're already using on campus. If you want to find out more about some of the potential use cases for generative AI across employment and education, we released a paper a couple of months ago called Realizing Generative AI's Transformative Impacts on Early Talent Openly and Ethically. And that talks through some of the use cases that we think are particularly relevant for careers professionals and employers and those working in HE. And it also sets out some of the foundational principles that will guide our work when we think about how we are going to build generative AI into our platform as well. The link on the screen takes you directly to our AI and talent blog, so you can download the report from there if you want to. Be careful because it is case sensitive, the link, so make sure to use those capitals, and I think it might appear in chat very soon. So as you may imagine, as a technology company, we have been researching and experimenting with generative AI for quite some time. And though the landscape is evolving extremely rapidly, we are aiming to incorporate new AI capabilities thoughtfully and deliberately, as Nima highlighted this morning, combining generative AI with connections to real people in a people-powered platform, because we think that's really, really important. Keeping those core values front and center. And one of those values is students first, as Charles shared this morning, and with that beautiful picture of our founders, which I'm sure they're very happy that we've shared. We are a business founded by students, so we want to understand students' needs and their perceptions, as we think about developing these types of initiatives. And so in October, we commissioned Savanta, which was formerly YouthSight, to survey 6,000 students across the UK, France and Germany, as well as to complete a number of qualitative interviews as well. And we wanted them to explore how students are navigating their career currently, where are they going for information and advice, but also their perceptions of AI and how it's changing the world around them. So there were 6,000 participants that took part in the survey. They were all aged between 18 and 28 years old, and they were all either in full-time or part-time education, studying for a BA or a master's degree, or they were in full-time employment and had graduated within the last 2 years. We also included home and international students in the research as well. So that is what I'm going to be sharing with you today. These are some of the insights, or very exclusive early insights from the UK respondents only. We're not planning to release the full report, research report, until January. So you are very much getting early insights into this research. So firstly, we, as a starting point, we wanted to understand, what information and support students and graduates have received so far in their career path. And whilst there was a relatively high number of students and graduates who said they have received help, to create a great and strong CV at 41%, only 27% said they had had information and support identifying the right career path for their interests and strengths. Only 1 in 5, so 20%, on building a professional network, and only 1 in 10, so 10%, on developing a professional brand. And I think this really highlights that despite the fact that, we walk around with a mobile phone in our hand and we have access to information and can contact anyone at any time, access to valuable and career support can be hard for some students and graduates to access. In fact, most of them in some cases. And as that's been sort of alluded to as well today, the data also shows that access to support can be harder to come by for some. So with students and recent graduates from a lower socioeconomic background reporting lower likelihoods of receiving information and advice on key topics, especially around preparing for interviews or receiving advice from alumni and professionals working in their field. When it comes to where students and graduates are looking for valuable information and advice, amidst an era of significant technological advancements, they are leveraging a broad array of in-person and digital sources to explore career paths, to understand the skills that they have developed through their education, through their personal experiences, and how to be successful in an application process. One statistic that I do want to call out is 1 in 4 students and recent graduates are now turning to social media video content, so platforms like TikTok, YouTube, Instagram, etc., for information on how to career paths that might be suitable for them and how to map against that. And whilst social media is nothing new, I think it really shows the diversity of content that now exists on platforms like TikTok and with trends like Career Talk. I went down a bit of a Career Talk rabbit hole last night. I don't know if any of you have done that, if you search the hashtag Career Talk. And there's definitely a variety of content available out there for students and graduates of mixed quality. It's actually really interesting to look at. And, as we say, as social media is not new, it's nothing new. I think it's really interesting that this kind of content is caught up really quickly with some of the perhaps more familiar sources of information and advice, like virtual events or alumni networks that we're perhaps more aware of or used to, and how important it is actually to think about some of these channels when we're thinking about driving engagement for students and getting that valuable information advice out in front of 1 in 4 students. Interestingly as well, when we asked students if these different sources were offering contradictory advice, who would you trust? And social media content is actually more trusted than some more traditional careers and job websites or professional networking sites. It came in 5th, which was quite surprising to me actually, but I think it speaks to some of the authenticity that students actually are starting to see in some of these platforms. Top though was lecturers and career services. And one thing I do want to call out, as this was a European wide piece of research, we conducted the research in Germany and France, is career services did not feature as highly on this list in France and Germany. I think that really speaks to the profile of careers professionals in the UK, which I think is something everyone in the sector should be extremely proud of. And from my point of view, presents a really important case for continuing to raise the profile and expanding the reach of information and advice that is coming from careers professionals to students and graduates. And to just bring this to life a little bit, I wanted to share this quote from some of the qualitative interviews that took place. I think it speaks really perfectly to how students are navigating a broad range of sources. It also brings to life what I think is a rather funny and somewhat relatable mother-daughter relationship. So the student said, I would definitely take online sources and in-person sources and combine them. But if anything, I would probably be more reliant on my online sources than my in-person sources. But it just depends on who. And I would never take my mother's advice because she's my mother, but I would take my career coach's advice, if you know what I mean. Which I think is a fascinating insight into how students are balancing different forces, but also that particular relationship. Another fascinating relationship that we wanted to explore in the research was how students and graduates are feeling about AI and how they're using it. So we asked them how familiar they are with AI tools like ChatGPT and DALL-E. And despite these technologies really only becoming widely available 12 months ago, 95% were aware of these tools and 77% were either already using them or exploring them or plan to use them in the next 6 months. And actually, going back to the comparisons across UK, France, and Germany, the UK is actually a little bit behind students in France and Germany here, with German students at 86% and students in France at 79%. If anyone has any hypotheses as to why that might be, I would be fascinated to hear them. Please feel free to pop them in the chat. And so alongside all of this awareness and exploration, there is in the main, a positive sentiment about AI amongst students and recent graduates, with students and graduates viewing AI predominantly as an opportunity rather than a threat. However, as you can see here, there are concerns about potential impact of generative AI on career trajectories for students and graduates. In some of the qualitative insights, you get a sense, and again, we sort of nodded to this a little bit this morning, that students and graduates understand that this is another technological wave, like those that have gone before, and they perhaps feel or aware that they can't hold it back, and instead want to learn, how to ride it. What are the opportunities? What are the risks? And how do they sort of make the most of this this wave as it comes? And this is also present in how students and graduates are thinking about their skill development as well, and the next steps in their career. So nearly 2/3 of the students that we spoke to were planning to acquire new skills because of the emergence of generative AI, and nearly half would be inclined to pursue roles that provided opportunities to use AI tools in their work. So students and graduates are really motivated to adapt to this AI-enabled workplace. In addition to using AI in the workplace, nearly half of students and recent graduates who intend to use generative AI tools in the next 6 months plan to use it as part of the job application process. So helping to write CVs, helping to write cover letters, preparing for job interviews. And I think this is really relevant for the kind of work that we're all doing across the sector. And a third actually intend to start using AI tools to complete their daily tasks and their daily work as well. So this is going to become, an ever-increasing part of students and graduates' daily lives. And this rapidly evolving sort of generative AI world and the multifaceted capabilities of generative AI are reshaping not only the daily lives of students and graduates, but also reshaping many of our working worlds as well. I don't know about you, but I am now probably using generative AI tools on a weekly basis. And I know colleagues that across various different industries, whether it's law, illustration, who are seeing new tools come out that begin to really transform how they work as well. And I think we've already started to see that with employers using some of these tools in their kind of recruitment processes, and careers professionals in the UK beginning to experiment with some of these tools as well. We've actually got case studies on our blog from 2 colleagues in the sector, Chris Webb and Danny Mercer, who have begun to explore how they can use some of these tools and critique some of these tools with students and bring them into their work. So in the research, we actually wanted to ask students and graduates, how comfortable are they actually with AI being used in a variety of different use cases, from employers, educators, and careers professionals, including careers professionals incorporating AI to provide personalized information and advice, and using AI to reach out and to provide additional support when was needed. And over half of recent graduates familiar with AI express comfort with educators, careers professionals, and employers leveraging AI in their work as well. There is, however, as you can see in the graph, slightly more discomfort, which I think is very understandable, with employers using AI to screen applications. But in the main, students and graduates are comfortable with educators, employers, and careers professionals beginning to use AI to augment their work. And the final insight I want to share from the research, and there'll be lots more to come in the coming months as we work through this data, reflects on what some of our colleagues have already discussed today, this morning. So part of supporting ethical development of any new technology is really working towards equity of usage as well. And we are already beginning to see a gender and socioeconomic gap emerging in AI utilization amongst students and graduates. So females and those from lower socioeconomic backgrounds display a comparatively lower comfort level in utilizing AI for either administrative, analytical, or creative tasks. And as I've been sort of mulling over this data over the last few weeks, I've had this statement from a global director of equity, diversity, inclusion going round in my head as we looked at some of this when we were talking about the impact of generative AI. And she said, if you look back over history, and again, some of the speakers have kind of nodded to this today, previous tech and industrial revolutions have not benefited all equally. Not everyone has played an equal part. And at this stage, at the start of this tech revolution, we have a chance to change that, to not necessarily hold the wave back, but change it at the beginning to make sure that it is equitable for all. And so I think one of the things and the ways that we work towards that is to make AI tools more accessible, to create easy to access educational materials that help people understand these rapidly evolving technologies, and working in partnership with technology providers, educators, and employers to ensure that AI is developed ethically and enables that equitable access. So we don't begin to see these gaps continue to expand. So all students and graduates can ride and shape that technological wave that's coming. So that kind of brings me on to my last point, which is if you do want to access some great educational resources on AI, covering things like what is a large language model, what's the difference between AGI and generative AI, as well as some of the latest news and insights from colleagues and AI experts. And you'll obviously get access to the full research when we publish it as well. You can sign up to our early talent and AI newsletter and visit our dedicated blog, which is shown on the screen. And I believe they will appear in chat shortly as well. I hope that was a helpful kind of snippet of some of the research that we've been exploring over the last few months and some of the things that we're thinking about as a business and hoping to share with you across the sector as well. So thank you for your time. If you'd like to find out more, feel free to message me directly. I'm always happy to chat, but I'll take any questions that anyone has. Thank you.
Thank you, Claire. That was super interesting. So much food for thought there, and lots going on in the chat now. I think there's a really interesting scenario that somebody's just dropped in the chat that'd be useful just to hear your reflections on. So recently we had a business pitch competition, and one of the teams, made up of 5 to 6 undergrad students, completely used an AI tool to write their business plan. They did it to stand out, and they didn't think it was cheating. They thought it was using a resource. What do you think?
Well, I suppose, what do I think whether that's cheating?
Yeah.
I don't think it's cheating personally, because when I look across at colleagues in the sector, people are already starting to use these tools to draft risk assessments, to draft emails, I think using it as a baseline to get not have a blank sheet of paper in front of you. I think that's the main thing. And then what you have to do as an individual, as a student, as a worker, is then use your critical thinking skills and your personal knowledge and experience and expertise to tailor that to what you know, that only you know uniquely. So I don't think it's cheating. I think it's, if they just left it at that and didn't do anything else with it, then I would argue that it's maybe not the best use and probably not the best way for them to hone their skills that they might need for the future. But I don't think it's cheating necessarily.
It's super interesting. Charles and I were at an event last week, an IFE event, and there were lots of employers there, and they were talking about obviously students using AI in applications, and a lot of them were really keen that students didn't use AI at all, and they were using techniques like having declaration statements at the start of their online application process, that kind of thing, to stop this. And it seemed to be sort of, they were trying to hold back this big massive tide, which it is just going to come. I think
the other thing is, like, those employers are probably going to be looking, given what's predicted around what generative AI is going to do for productivity, those employers are also thinking about how they can use, get on ride that wave as well, and like get some of those efficiencies within their business. So I think it's maybe a bit short-sighted to try to almost put in students' mind that is cheating, and then when they get into the workplace, they're going to be asked to think about how can you drive inefficiencies, how can you become more productive. So I think it creates a tension. Going back to the slide that was shared earlier around the transition, I think it creates a tension as students move from education, from the application process into work, that I don't know is particularly helpful. One of the questions we asked students as well in the research we haven't dug into yet is, do you feel comfortable disclosing your usage of AI? Which I think is going to be really interesting to understand the breakdown of that. Like, do you feel comfortable disclosing it to an employer? In which case, which use cases do you do? And I'd be really interested to display that. And I think the other thing I would say is, like, for years, people have had access to advice from uncles or friends, or who have already, been through an application process, or perhaps know how to write a business plan. In a way, this is kind of the same, as long as you see it as a source of information and advice and not a final output.
There's a great comment here from Sarah Jameson. She says that one of the dilemmas that careers teams are facing when they're working with students is where to signpost them to, what should they be using, because everything's moving so quickly, and lots of the platforms are trying to get you to sign up for multi-year licenses, which obviously in a fast-moving environment can be a little bit risky.
Yeah, we've actually, I sound like I'm just plugging the blog, but on the blog we've put a few different tools that we think are interesting. So not just ChatGPT, not DALL-E, but some of the other tools that we think are potentially interesting, that a lot of them have free kind of trials that people can use as well. So if you do want to explore some tools that might be useful for you, but also useful for students, there are some listed there. And it's definitely something that we're starting to think about, how do we bring this into our technology as well, so that it is accessible, and that as careers professionals can have access to it, but also students can as well, in a place that isn't behind a paywall. Because I think that's also a problem when we look at some of those gaps we were just talking about. Putting things behind a paywall is unfortunately going to create a divide. So we need to think really carefully about how these are accessible. But check out the blog for some interesting ones. There's one called Yodely, which is great, which is about public speaking practice, which I love and think is a great tool for students. So have a look.
Fantastic. I think we've got time, just one last quick question. I think this is a great point here from Marie. Do you think that using AI will become a skill that is put on CVs in the future, or is this already happening?
Great question. I think it's already happening. So we looked at, because with our network, we were able to look at job descriptions through the months over the summer around what's changing in the language in job descriptions. And forgive me, I've forgotten the stat. It's in the paper, or we published it a couple of months ago, but I think it's either 3 or 6 times the number of job descriptions went up. So 3 times or 6 times as many job descriptions included AI within the job description. So looking for AI skills. So I think it's already happening, to be honest, and I think that's likely to increase, which really, go back to that last point, I think is one of the reasons why we really need to start to normalize usage and start to educate students across the board. Because if that's already beginning to happen and we're starting to see a gap in utilization, there's a real risk that not everyone is going to be taken on this journey, and that's something we really do need to change, unlike the previous revolutions that have gone past.
Definitely. Thanks so much, Claire. That has been such an insightful session, and I'll look forward to going on the blog and reading lots more about it.